Stephanie, I want to read this next question to you. Last August, the Harvard Business Review featured an article entitled, "They Burned the House Down." It was an interview with Michael Lynton. Lynton is the CEO of Sony Pictures Entertainment. The article discussed the attack by North Korea and the release of the film, The Interview. Lynton stated, the bigger challenge was that the folks who did this didn't just steal practically everything from the house. They burned the house down. They took our data, then they wiped stuff off our computers, and then they destroyed our servers and our computers. And for people listening in today, it's no longer a question of if you're going to get hacked, it's when that will happen. Could you comment a little bit about this article and what Lynton was saying? Because as I read this article, I think a lot of people don't think this basic level, but they had trouble making payroll, because you got to imagine, if all of your information, just the way your organization breathes and thinks, you have an absence of your technology to be able to function. So could you comment a little bit about that article?
Sony was and is a classic example of a company that had a well thought out security team, sound architecture, state-of-the-art technology for security, and was still breached. They had business resumption plans and business continuity plans also. What they weren't prepared for was the attack that came through. Some say that it was a phishing email that was opened by an employee months ahead of the actual red skull appearing on their computer screens, warning that intellectual property and Sony secrets were about to be released. When that happened, it threw them into a state of no network. Their network wasn't just DDoS, but everything came down. They had no email. They had to revert to phone trees for telephone to communicate. They had intellectual property that was released out through social media and lost millions and millions of dollars. Their actual disaster recovery plan took time to be implemented. It wasn't well rehearsed, is my guess. And it took them days to bring things up and to try to get some semblance of business as quasi-normal. So had they had an early detection of that phishing email, that malicious code on the network, they may have been able to have reduced the footprint of the breach and continued normal business operations and not lost that intellectual property.
I have a question. I want to get into a little more details about their time to detect and how long, and the actual cost of that attack is staggering. But before we get there, we had talked about myself and Kurt. We had talked about this idea of a powder keg situation where something happens in our community that we're not planning for. It's a difficult situation, and it could be a private company, it could be a government organization, where you find yourself the target of every hacker, hacktivist, or cyber criminal in the world is, for a certain period of time, is going to be looking at your organization. So, the question for people, I think we've made clear, it's not a question of if, but when it's going to happen. What do you do to get ready for the when? I mean, it's coming. So what and you've had leadership roles with many large organizations. What do they do to begin to prepare and anticipating the next powder keg situation?
What they need to do is develop a good business resumption and business continuity plan. They need to make sure that they test it, that it is sound, that everyone is aware of the plan, that everyone knows what needs to happen if something were to go down. And with that, again, they need monitoring of the network.
I think that is really important is looking at partnering with a resource, a company like LinkSource, who has the skill set, the background, like a Stephanie, to sit there and help you discover which technologies that you can leverage that are out there in this space.
Well, and you know, and the thing is, you don't want to be negotiating a contract, you know, Saturday night when everyone's gone because something has happened, and getting prepared for that. And you know, I think we live in this world now where it's, and I want to talk a little bit more about this in the interview, where it's really about the time to detect something and what the cost is on that. But you know, but back to the question that I was asking you is that we've watched it here in our own state of California. We've watched other situations like last year with Missouri. We've seen, we've even watched you know, private sector organizations like Home Depot have challenges, and Target. And so, you know, the question that I wanted to kind of move back to a little bit is, we all know something like this can occur. So what do you get in place as we are, you know, preparing? Because it's you know, when a powder keg situation happens, it's about protecting your customers, serving your citizens, getting the right information to the right person at the right time. And you know, again, what are some of the preventive things that an organization can do? Not that you have a crystal ball for every situation, and I'm sure, you know, Sony looks back and says, we could have done this, this, and that. What are the lessons learned from something like this for organizations listening to our...
Yeah, the biggest part of that is the communication. As Kurt said, the establishment of critical relationships are important to have those in place, whether they be with a company like ours, law enforcement, another technology company, your telecom provider, etc. Having those in place ahead of that disaster, emergency, that downtime will speed up the recovery time. Again, as you mentioned, the detection, the monitoring, knowing about those things ahead of time is critical in minimizing the risk.